just take these chairs out,
And then,
like
okay.
out of the setup.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, let's just do that. Might as well. That'll be good.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
How is it, like, tap the screen?
Yes, there you go.
I saw it like.
Yeah, just after. Usually the right. Wow, this is great.
What's up, McGovern?
All this.
How you doing?
Yeah.
I'm good. Hanging in there? Yeah. Are you tired? Oh, do I look tired? No. I feel tired. I'm joking around about it. Like, I feel tired after yesterday. I'm busy. Yeah. But it was fun yesterday. Oh, right. And then we got to sail the old. You do what? We got to sail the old. Yeah. It's pretty awesome, right? I told my squad leader, so I told him yesterday, so I was skipping the first 3 games, because I would challenge, but then I finished, and I stayed. I think so, I mark it every week. Like, it was so frustrating. You know what I mean? Oh, I can start it. I want to be like, to you. That's okay. I don't know if my influence would be. Maybe not. We'll see. No, this time McGovern. I'll say, hey, it's there. And then I like maybe talk to anyone like I can do Mr. Runner all the time. Yeah.
You don't know your Luca? Okay, all right, that's fair.
And Mr. Archibald actually texted me yesterday.
Hey, Ryan.
He always has me going to, and yeah, I think he's coming out from yeah, I think he's passing down, I think
How do you investigate your own if that works?
I haven't seen him, but.
Yeah, nothing's
Sure,
actually
check
hooked up
it
over
out.
there.
I can.
So you have it all.
Yeah. Is that all right? Okay.
This one?
Okay, all right, yeah. Yeah, feel free to all that.
I
This
know.
one is stuck when I first got it done. I can even like.
I could.
Do no sliding off the cover.
I know it's a short time, you know.
So the officers will stand on Thursday at 9 and get coffee. I would love to do it, but I do teach super. And actually, I'm gonna be in town. I'm going to Chicago for a conference. Flights go, I will not be like carnival. So if you just. Oh, for your section. Yeah, Michelle and Jeremy. Sorry, I've been teaching. I really was seriously. Yeah.
But it's like they have these words.
Yeah, it's like very, I mean, the whole thing, everything else is like.
Yeah.
I've played it. How do you say the last?
I actually really cool.
And it's audience, yeah. And I was actually a piece right. I thought it was called Shout, but I don't know. Okay. Yep. Oh, it's so cool. I like the. Probably like shake. And like one of the smart moves is. Yeah, it was so cool. I can't go. And I said I was not going to dance for the audience. She's awesome. She's like. Oh my God. Yeah, her was just fun, right? Yeah, it's gonna be really good. Yeah, the rhythm in the beginning, I was like, oh, I musicianship we can do. Yeah, it's cool. It's a very fun piece. Yeah. What do you think of Justin Drum and Melissa? I really like this. It's cool because like if you hear a piece called Symphonic, it's gonna sound like a band. Yeah. And it's not. It's so cool. Yeah. So this is my favorite piece that she's cool.
It's awesome. Just played Philly Billy. It's really good.
Oh, thank you. They're expensive.
We win again,
Every time I
it's
tell
so
her, and I
true.
get
Well, they're drinking, but.
We'll just ignore that part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just my favorite.
I also won a Garfield playing basketball.
Melissa's
And like
going
Jim Davis, like the
on the
illustrator
G-Day.
for Garfield.
No,
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 more than
one
you
up.
Oh,
That's what you think?
we never do that because we have like right on 4th of July. And,
I'm not sure I can handle that one, but.
yeah. We've been asked, but we get a lot of money for winning this race.
What are you doing? Oh, yeah, do the money parade. Yeah, we'll talk to them and have a race.
God knows it.
That's for when we do the panel, so we can sit like normal humans amongst this crew.
You're first.
I like to go first and then get it done, and then I can heckle everyone else.
Yeah.
Like Robin, like,
So,
right, it's 12 o'clock, right? That's-
Yep.
so I'm like, I'm not. Especially for this weekend.
Yes.
All right, well, it is noon. Let's get started here. Thank you so much to our 4 guests for being here today, for outstanding music educators in the field. We're very grateful for you to be here, so thank you so much. The topic for today is programming for the wind band, and we're kind of discussing these 4 different perspectives today. So we're going to start with Rachel Maxwell.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hello. I teach middle or junior high, we call it. It's 6th through 8th grade, so it's really middle school. And our beginners are our 6th graders, to give you some perspective. So 2nd year kids are 7th grade, 8th grade, 3rd year, and we do grade level bands. We do not do ability-based bands. So that does have some impact on how I select literature. So let me go through my.
Oh, no.
Ryan cast a
Way
safe.
to go.
All right.
Okay, you're good. Hold on.
Yes.
I would just click the actual screen. Don't worry about that.
Don't touch the,
No,
okay.
just tap the screen over here.
I've never felt
You got
older. More out of touch.
Just the other
It's gotta go
side.
on.
There you go.
That's me. Okay, so I'm at Trauber down in Oswego, and Ryan is like a local, he's my backyard neighbor. That's how the connection is. All right, so 3 basic big ideas of when I screen literature for infants. When I screen sound before sight, I listen before I look at anything. I kind of equate it to like when you learn art, you're going to look at art before you learn the details of it. So this is a listening art. So I listen like crazy. Then I'm checking and looking at my score as my second step, and then I'm building my cycle around that. So those are my big 3 steps. Oh, this. Okay, literature screening. All right, so I am a huge band nerd listener, band literature listener. So where do I listen? Okay, I get on all the publishers' websites and I just like let their playlist go. Just listen through the websites. I get on YouTube. All the publishers have YouTube sites. I listen to live concerts that are streaming, get on people's live streams, the NBA list, teaching music through performance in band. I go and I sit at contests and festivals all day and I mark up the programs like crazy. Spotify, there's a lot of band playlists on Spotify. Kurt Gross has the epic all-time playlist of things I could never play, but listen to. Go to conferences, obviously. You always hear new things, obviously. Podcasts, there's just so many new band content, podcasts out there. The Texas UIL list is kind of a good source for just perusing through things. But the rule is, do not rely on lists or other people's recommendations unless you listen to it and it's something that you really speaks to you. It is something that you find value in and it matches your situation. Because I cannot tell you, and I'm not even going to name the pieces because I'll probably offend somebody in the room. But there's 4 or 5 pieces that every college director says young band should play that I will never play over my cold dead body because children hate those songs. Okay, so, and I hate them as well because they're just very dry and artsy and boring and they just don't resonate with children. So make sure there's songs that mean something to you and the children that are actually sitting in front of you before you select them. Okay, this is it. Musical authenticity. It has to ring true to you musically. It cannot, when I'm listening, especially for my littles, now 6th grade beginner band, this is where this is a little bit of a stretch, but it's possible. If it doesn't sound authentic to me and it's not something that I would want to listen to outside of a school setting, I do not want to program it, because the last thing anybody wants to sit and listen to is educational music. So if I'm hearing da 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 da, next, it's like, I called it band Tinder. I swipe as fast as possible. So a lot of times I will put on these playlists and things, and I'll be doing something else. And if it's all just sort of background noise and it's just going by, and I'm like either doing my reading for my own schoolwork, or I'm grading paper, whatever I'm doing, and the music's just going by, it's not grabbing my ear at any way, especially if I'm listening to new stuff I don't know. I'm just letting the playlist roll, and as soon as something goes, my ears perk, then I go and I tend to that. Whoa, what was that? And I go back and I back it up and I listen to that. And then that will make my check back on this piece later list. Okay, so it has to have something musically authentic to it that would make, if I was an adult and they passed it out in the adult band I play in, I would want to play it. If I heard another ensemble playing it, I would want to go listen to it no matter what grade it is. Okay, so what does that mean, musical authenticity? Number one, it has to have melodic craftsmanship. I mean, if there isn't something melodically engaging with just a melody that develops and is passed throughout the band, to me, it's just a dead piece. It doesn't mean anything, it doesn't speak. Kids are gonna not buy into it. And if you don't have buy-in to your music, particularly with young kids, you will have lots and lots of problems in your ensemble. Musical buy-in will create a really positive culture. It'll create kids who are engaged, kids who are excited to play. It will eliminate a lot of behavior problems. So if you have authentic music that your kids are excited about, it makes your life a lot easier in so many ways. I think it's the most important thing that you're going to spend your time selecting. So melodic craftsmanship is number one. And then harmonic interest. If it's just, now with really young bands, of course it has to have pretty typical, pretty predictable harmonic movement, because there's only so many things that our low brass is going to do in 6th and 7th grade. But there's composers out there who are really artistic about this and really know what they're doing and handle it really tastefully. So it's not ultra predictable. And there's, I would say probably 75% of the grade 1, grade 2 music is pretty predictable. And I would kind of like, it's okay, but it's not something special. Pass on it. But there are a lot of things out there that have these two elements in it in the grade 1 and grade 2 category. And if you just take your time and listen to them and be patient, you can find these. Slide your finger if you did that point left. Okay, rhythmic vitality. I kind of already did an example of that, like, I cannot. Okay, I'll just, no. There has to be some sort of like authentic rhythmic pattern that doesn't just sound like that typical 1984, I don't want to rip on James Morgan because he's done a lot of lovely things, but, we just can't, even our friend, Mr. Standridge, who I love dearly and has written a lot of original things. Sometimes some of his patterns do sound a little predictable where I'm like, no, they're just like pulling that usual little junior high, like little, sounds like a 1980s drama theme music background to it. So if it has like sort of that predictability to it, I skip on that because kids can they just spot that sort of like corniness a mile away and they get really bored with it really fast. I also think, is this something I want to live with for the next 8 to 9 weeks? And I have to really care about this music and I have to love this music because I'm going to go through a lot of time before it sounds good, before it sounds really beautiful. And I have to really love it to devote like my excitement and interest and like energy and really get the kids hyped that, okay, this is something we really have to invest in. And so it's got to be something worth my energy for 8 to 9 weeks. Oh, I almost dumb smartboard. Okay, timbre and orchestration. Now, I do like traditional scoring with my younger bands. Like I do like my altos and my horns together because little kids, I would consider through middle school little kids, they really need that. I consider the woodwind instruments like the bones of the parts and the brass are sort of the guts that warm up those things. So I need like my tenor saxes to provide some structure for my baritone players. I need my bari sax to provide really firm structure for my tubas to fit into the sound. My altos provide the structure for my horns to be really confident in their notes. But at the same time, everything's not necessarily going to have to be block scored. Those voices can be used creatively, like Pierre LaPlante does that really well. Anything in the Dane or the Dan catalog, however you want to pronounce it, does that really creatively. So if you look, Julie Giroux, her, grade 2 stuff's really creative in that regard. Now, is everything I play going to be really interesting with timbre and orchestration? Not necessarily. We're going to do some things that are more traditional and blocked, particularly with my 6th graders, because they're brand new little band fetuses. They don't know what's going on. They need to like be with their little group. But as they get a little more confident, that's got to be interesting. Did I go forward when I swiped?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I need an assistant swiper. Isn't that a thing in Dora? Isn't that Dora? All right, so it's structure, balance, contrast, or form. If there's too much repetition, snoozeville. But there is normal forms that we use, contrast or form. But anytime make sure that there's a balance within it, that it's repetitive, but not overly. And you'll hear it, like if you hear the same thing 4 or 5 times and you're like, oh my gosh, enough, the kids will feel the same way. So any boredom you are feeling with the piece, any kind of like, ew, enough of that, your kids will feel it times 10. But if there's no repetition, if there's no patterns, that's gonna be very, very difficult for you to teach. All right, so you have to find a really good, it's a really fine line between patterns and boredom. So be looking for that. And then emotional impact and sensitivity. If this music doesn't have some emotional ebb and flow and some meaning to it, kids want that. They're really, really hungry, especially littles are really hungry for artistic experiences that reflect what's going on in their lives. At our Concert Thursday, we just did a Standridge piece, Where Words End, which is 100% about reflecting emotions. And I talked to them about how open he is about some of his emotional and mental health struggles he's had, and how good he is about writing for young bands and reflecting those things very honestly. And he is so respectful of younger kids and what they go through, because he writes for that age group, and he understands they go through those things, and that their music should reflect some of the struggles they have and some of the emotional turmoil they go through. And so he has really interesting chords in there that like have a lot of tension in them, and then release and resolution. And not everybody's writing those kind of things or putting big emotional impact points. And kids love that because they want music that sounds the way they feel, and they really respond to that. So if you can find, and not everything has to be hit over the head with an emotional drama, but put some things into your program that have that longevity potential. Obviously, I don't buy a lot of like hardly anything that's poppy or like even movie music, or I just don't, because it runs out of its cool factor very, very quickly. The shelf life is so short on that kind of stuff. Sometimes though, you will get like things that are like classics. Like I pulled out, there's a really good arrangement of Classical Gas that was written for, you could do it on keyboard instruments. And so we did that a couple of years ago as a pop tune. The kids had never heard it, but it was like a huge hit in the early 80s. All their parents were like, I love this tune. And then the kids, once they heard it, thought it was great. Or like old classic rock tunes that you get a really clever arrangement of is really appealing to them. So try to avoid things that are really cool right now, because it won't be by the time you play the concert usually. And usually the arrangements are just awful, because anything that's rock or pop, it never translates to a concert band. We just cannot pull it off in the same way. And when people say, well, why don't you play things that are like the kids' music? Because we can't do it justice. We'll never sound as cool as Lizzo sounds on her music. So why don't we try to sound really good on music that's authentically written for us? And then my last consideration is its pedagogical and educational usefulness, because if all these things are in place, then it will be pedagogically and educationally useful to my children. And I will find pieces that cut time 6/8 I'll balance the programming once these things are considered. But I'm not looking at a piece as the first thing, I need something to teach my kids 6/8. Let's look through the drawer and what do I have? That's I'm not looking in that order. That's the last thing I'm considering. Because I want them to have an artistic, authentic experience with their music. And then we'll figure out my cycle of how that fits. I'll never live down this swiping. Okay, so then I check my score. So I've listened to the pieces. So let's say I listened to like the whole Hal Leonard new catalog and I've got like 6 things I like. So I made a list of the 6 things I like and I saved their links. And then I put them away. A couple days later, I go back and I start listening to them again. I'm like, okay, I like all 6 of these things. They are kind of hitting all the checkpoints for me. And I start writing down like, okay, I think that would be like maybe a 7th grade beginning of the year piece, and that might be an 8th grade middle of the year piece, just about like where I think they are by listening to them. Then I go back and I pull up the scores to see if it matches what I think. And so here's things I look at when I'm looking at the scores. Program, especially with young kids, easier than you think. Do not program things you remember. I remember when we played that in junior high or when I was a freshman, or your memory is going to not serve you well because you really can't compare the level of what your experience was to what you have in front of you as a teacher accurately. It won't do justice to, you just can't really gauge where you were as a student to where your kids are going to be. So do not do not think because you did Alfred Reed's Greensleeves in 8th grade that your 8th grade should play it. That should never happen, ever, never. Ever. Okay, can I say one more time? You should never play that. Okay, so less is more. We develop range outside of literature. So if there's something in the range of the literature that you have not worked on in warm-ups, exercises, etudes, scales, rhythm sets, we should not be putting it in the music yet. Okay, they're not developing range in the literature. So less is more on that. Rhythms. Only use rhythms we have already or will soon master in isolation with rhythm sets. So if I'm looking at, say, something that has 6/8 rhythms in it, and I know, okay, well, we're going to do a lot of 6/8 rhythm sets in class, and there's a lot of block scoring with it, and traditional voicing, like voice groupings, and I know, okay, these are all fairly easy entrances, they're not coming in off rests and things, then I know I can teach it to them. But if there's lots of independence and we haven't really mastered that yet, I'm not going to pass out a piece unless we've really mastered it. Like if I put rhythm sets with scales, or if I've put it in different like etudes around the room, like we do F around the room in different rhythm sets and things, and they're like killing it, then I know if I see those rhythms in a piece of music, okay, it'll work. Fine. 6th grade, we do look for a lot of block scoring because we're trying to build their confidence. We're trying to get them to understand, how does a band sound? We start together, we sustain together, we end together. What does that sound like? How do they make themselves and their trio sound good? What does it sound like to make your section sound good? So we do tons of block playing with the 6th graders and at the beginning of the year for 7th and 8th graders, because I want them to learn tone, balance, blend, how they articulate the front of their notes, how they sustain and how they end. So we work the first cycle, a lot of that kind of thing. But then we build in gradual independence, and then, like I said, traditional instrument groupings and doublings throughout almost all of middle school. Even like when I do grade 3 and some easy grade 4 stuff, there's grade 3 and 4 music out there that is easier because of how the texture is written. Okay, because you can do some technical things, but if the texture is pretty thick and pretty doubled, your kids can do it. If it's super independent and sparse, that's where things get scary for young kids. And that's what you want to wait until they get a little more mature and independent. This is really important that people don't think about, particularly with like the 6th and 7th, well, even my 8th graders, the look. The page has to be super clean and uncluttered. Make sure your font is really clear. Make sure they can see everything. Give your kids, I know I'm going to like copyright prison someday, but I'm fine with that. They have to have rehearsal copies to write on. They have to. I mean, we buy obviously everything, but we give them rehearsal copies. They have to be able to write in measure numbers. They have to be able to write in, if they need a note name written in, they have to write in a fingering. We actually use colors for dynamics. We use blues for everything soft, we color in our dynamics. We use red for everything loud. We highlight our dynamics. Same way I would mark my scores. If I have kids freaking out because they're like, I can't, like sometimes the woodwinds can't get their notes, we blow it up to 120, and all of a sudden it's like the big note book of songs, and suddenly they can figure out to play it. If the notes are bigger and spaced out, their mind calms down quite a bit and the reading gets easier. And I just stole these ideas from the reading teachers. Like what makes it easier to read words applies to the music as well. So if your kids are freaking out, because think about like the little folio, like marches, how hard those are to read. Well, you blow that music up and suddenly you can see the notes, same thing. So do that for your kids. If something's really like tight or messy, clean up the copy for them. I'm dying. Okay, so real quick, I'll be fast here. How do I build the cycle then? Because this is really important. Ryan. I think your hands are sweaty. Okay, so I put march here. I don't always do a march, but I do a march type piece, something that's like structured, etc. Something expressive. I put overture, but it's usually kind of like our big, like barn burner, like our big piece. And then maybe something that's more of a novelty. Lots of times our concerts will have 3 pieces, sometimes 4. But, you know, just like you can't eat a meal with this, you know, all sugar on it. Unless you're doing a sugar concert, then that would be a great marching band show, but you want to enjoy it. So contrasting and complementary styles, moods, techniques, colors, keys, and tempi. So try not to have everything be like, you know, oh, everything's about dragons. That might seem like a cool theme of the concert, but by the end of the concert, no one's going to care about dragons anymore. It's like too much dragon. So vary these things and think, does this make a good set? Like if this was the Rolling Stones making their set list, would this be a good set list? So when if I've listened to all the songs and I think, okay, these are the 3 that are going to go together, the 4 that are going to go together, I actually make playlists out of them and I put them in the order I want them in. And then I listen to them over and over in my car in that playlist order. And sometimes I'll think, oh, this is going to be the coolest, greatest, you know, show, concert cycle. And then I'm like, oh, these 3 don't work together at all. That second tune is such a drag after hearing the first tune, or it's just too much of the same mood, or they all sound too English, or whatever. And so then I mix it up, or I'm like, okay, I'll pull this one out and stick that one there. But make a playlist and play it for yourself a few times and be like, if I'm seeing this concert, is this engaging to me as a student, as an audience member? Is this whole concert balanced? Does this a little bit everything? Does it feel like it has like an arc to the concert cycle, a beginning, a development, and an end? Please don't repeat composers on the same concert with the same band. The one time I might do that is we do a ton of Queenwood with our 6th graders. Somebody the other day said, hey, is it okay, I'm in the middle school band, is it tacky if I do like 3 Randall Standridge pieces on one concert? And I just went, yes, period. But everybody else is like, oh no, you do you. And I'm like, you're all wrong. You're wrong. Don't do that. And there's no excuse to have an all-white cis male program every cycle. I mean, there's nobody out there who wants you to program their music because they happen to be gay or Black or Hispanic. They're not like, I want to be programmed because of those things, but there's enough excellent material that if you just are aware and are listening and looking at those things, you will find things that fit these criteria that you can easily program and put into your concerts without it being a token or a performative type of programming, because that nobody wants that, obviously. But just your open-mindedness and awareness, and just be looking at those, listening to those composers, and when it fits, utilize them. My sweaty hands. And then this I can share with you guys. This is how I build my cycles. Here's our 3 bands. Here's our concerts we have. I blocked out who does it. I put in the concerts with a link. I'm holding pens down here, and then I just keep moving around what I use or don't use, pull it out. And then that way I go back all year and I keep thinking like, okay, is that what I really want? Now it works. Is that what I really want there? But I keep moving that grid around all year and pull things out, but we can share this all with you guys. But that helps me keep track of what I do. And then I have every previous year of those. And then I have every single thing I've ever played since I've been at Traverse since 1995. I have that whole of every concert. Like I can tell you like what I played on every concert with every band. So that most of it's okay. There's some dogs in there, but we can share that out. But that's kind of like my system for young band literature. But it starts with is it music that is authentically interesting and engaging? And then you go from there. All right.
Great.
Number 2. Okay.
Thank you very much. Next up is Dr. Fleming. And there'll be a time for questions at the end, so write down questions if you have them. All 4 will finish at the time. Okay.
Hi everyone, how's everybody doing this morning? Afternoon, where are we? Afternoon, it is afternoon. I mean, it just feels like morning, I don't know. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about how I approach programming. There are some things that we'll probably all kind of double on and steal today, but the idea that I kind of label my programming is called intentional programming, and it kind of is built off of this concept. Oh, there it is. That everything is intentional, including how I start. So the first thing I do, I just create a database for myself. And I very intentionally create it. So what does that mean? I'm intentionally creating that. And one of my teachers used to say that, you know, everything that you're collecting in your like teacher basket is your picnic basket. So that's the kind of the metaphor I use. Okay, so what is in your picnic basket? And this is, again, I just created a giant spreadsheet. I'm going to show you what what mine looks like. But I just ask myself these questions, like, what pieces do I like? What pieces do I enjoy? And same thing that Rachel just talked about, right? Like, I'm using my lens of like, what is good music? And I take down everything from grade 1 to whatever, like when Symphony's about to play, right? Anything that could be anything, like all music of any kind. And this is where I started. Like, what do I just like? What's like catching my ear? What are things that I've played before that I like? What are things that I've heard in concerts and festivals? Anything. Like, just what do I like? The next thing I do is I think through, like, what composers do I like? And that could be outside of the band world, right? But like, what composers are catching my ear? Like, okay, there's this composer who I love, but they're only writing grade 6 music right now. Okay, but I'm gonna keep them on my list because someday I'm gonna commission them to write something grade 3 or 4, right? Like, these are just people that I have to keep like, okay, this is who I need to keep on my radar, okay? This is huge. I'm sure like you all are doing this already, but I have multiple text threads with multiple people and I say, what are you playing? Like, what is on your program? And then I listen to it and I decide, should it go on my list or not, right? Like, I always use my own lens, but a lot of times like, oh, I just heard this premiered and I just had this and I just had this composer out to work with my students and they were fabulous and like, I don't know about them yet. So anything I can do to just collect information, like it's like data mining, right? Like just use your friends to do work for you and then you can steal your data. It's all I'm teaching us. What's new, right? There are so many times, and I'm sure you all feel it too, like you go, oh, I heard someone's playing this piece or I heard it at a conference, but then like, you don't know the recording yet, right? There's no recording online yet, or someone hasn't, like, you just have to ask. Just ask people, hey, do you have a recording for your concert you'd be willing to share? Sometimes they say no, and that's okay. But sometimes they're like, yeah, sure, here's a recording, take it, right? Like, this will be, it's just just ask. Don't be afraid, yeah? And that's a great way to just get a sense of like what's happening right now, like on the ground. There are pieces that I was looking to program with Heinsley that I was like, I don't know what this is. I think I might like this. And now I have stuff for it, but I didn't 3 months ago, right? So just go out there and see what's new. And this is like my soapbox thing. Get outside of the band world, right? We all listen to band music a lot, but get outside of that world. What are new operas that are being premiered? What are new pieces? Who is the Chicago Symphony and the New York Phil? Ask who are they premiering right now? Who's Eighth Blackbird? Who's Alarm Will Sound? These like chamber groups that are all contemporary. Who are they premiering? Who are they commissioning? Because this is who will become our base of the future of our repertoire, right? This is how we get outside of our band silo. What are some new vocal works that are being written, right? Like just what's new that is not just in the band world. And that just helps us grow as musicians in general, but it's a really, really healthy way to go for it. So really, it's just about being curious, right? And where can I find music? Okay, so this is an example. It's a little screenshot of my list, like just the top of my list right now. So this is what it looks like. I just like throw pieces on there, dates, composition, the length is huge. I have obviously some work to do there. But like I just throw pieces on there that I'm interested on. Like, oh, I heard this, or like this might be for like Roshana Dazai. We're doing a piece right now in Heinsley by her. She had this new piece for it. I don't know it yet, but I'm gonna find out what it is. I'm gonna figure it out. Gala Flagella, who's actually a Michigan composer, she's premiering a new piece for like grade 6 with chamber ensemble in spring. But she already said, hey, I kind of want to write a piece for like grade 3 band. I said, great. She's like, I think it might be this. Great, it's on my list. We're gonna figure it out. But it's just a way for me to deposit stuff. It's just like kind of like a giant dumping ground, right? And then I go back and sift through it. But there are 3 tabs on the spreadsheet. This is the first tab. This is like pieces I should know. The second tab is composers I should know. And then the third tab is what I'm actually going to want to program. So it's like a way of me like filtering and collecting ideas. The whole point of this is just to collect, and it's everything. Anything could be that could turn into something, but it's just a place for me to do it. Okay. Then I think this is where the intentional piece comes in. Okay. Then my question to myself is, am I hitting diversity in multiple senses of the word? So some of that. There we go. Some of that is like very technical things. Like, do I have a range of grade levels on this list? Right? If you know your group's gonna play around like a grade 3 or 4, do I have grade 5s and 2s on there too? Right? Do I just have everything that I could possibly ever want to program on there? Do I have a diverse list of people of different identities? Right? Am I being really intentional about who I'm listening to and who I'm seeking out? Do I have a diversity of eras on there? Right? Like, is there some way that I can work in like the Renaissance or Baroque era in there, but also like representing contemporary music? Like, what eras am I letting my students be exposed to? What sound worlds, right? I'm thinking right now, just because I'm in the middle of studying this cycle, but for Heinsley right now, right, that we're doing this piece by Roshana Dazadi that I mentioned, that she's a totally different sound world than everybody else in the program, right? We're doing a piece by Nellie Bell, completely different sound world than everybody else on the program. Like, what sound worlds am I collecting? Because I really like these certain sound worlds, so I have too many of those. So it's just a way of like, okay, what do I need myself to diversify my listening to? Diversifying the student experience. So this is, and I'll show you on the spreadsheet that is coming up next. This is what Rachel was talking about listening through the program. This is huge. Like, are the trumpet players going to want to slash my tires at the end of the program? Right? Like, am I being too demanding on them? Do my percussionists have enough to do? Am I providing a varied experience for them? Like, they have to know how to play mallets and lyrical works, but they also know how to play snare drum and march, right? Like, they just need a whole lot of different experiences. Are my woodwind players, is it too technical? Is it too demanding? Or am I, again, providing a diverse experience for them? So I really am consciously thinking about, like, I'm going to be the clarinet player for today. I'm going to sit through and, like, what are these parts going to look like on my stand all cycle? What's the demand I'm going to ask for them outside of rehearsal time? Like, is it too much, or is it something that's going to push them just enough, or are they going to think, I don't even have to look at it, it's too easy? Where's that happy medium of the student experience? And then I also look at the objective elements, right? Am I doing enough pieces with the different keys, different time signatures, all those things? Again, it's not like my main factor, but I'm going to look at that, right? If I'm going to do this whole program in the same key, right? But so I'm trying to think about all of those different things. Okay, so once I have that list created of these are pieces I'm interested in, these are things, they're composers that, okay, I'm interested in them, but I don't know anything about them yet. And these are pieces I think I could program. That third tab, what I think I could program, I ask these 2 questions. What am I missing from that list of diversity that I was prioritizing? And who am I missing off that list of diversity pieces that I was talking about? So and then I go back and I fix it, right? If I don't have enough pieces that are lyrical, I go back and fix it. If I look through and I'm like, wow, this list doesn't have a lot of women composers on it, I go back and fix it. I just need to go find more. You just have to keep digging. This thing takes forever, but it's worth it. It's worthwhile work, but it does just take time to do it, okay? Okay, so I now have this very intentionally created list of pieces that I think I could program. To give you a sense, you know, let's say this year with Heinsley, we'll do 20 to 25 pieces. My list for Heinsley right now is 255 pieces, right? So like you just need to like have all of the resources really intentionally collected, right? You have to give yourself options because the options are what's going to set you up for success. If you don't have the options, there's nothing worse than having like 15 pieces and going, how am I going to make this? And then you put yourself into a corner. You just have to give yourself as many options as possible. Have a plan, as what you used to say. Okay, this is huge. How long should the program be? This is where sometimes we get trapped into over or under programming, is like how much time can they play? how long should the program be in terms of like the physicality, but also how much time am I going to have to rehearse this? You'll see when I show you my Hindsley planning doc, I'll show you a screenshot of that. Like I calculate how many rehearsals are in each cycle because they're not even. Like we have more rehearsals in this cycle than we did last cycle. So that changes what I'm gonna program. How are those rehearsals divided up? Do we have spring break in the middle of those rehearsal cycles, right? Like that'll really determine how I'm going to structure those and the time piece of this. Then I think about the non-negotiables. Like what do I have to have programmed? Things like next semester, not this semester, but next semester with Hindsley, we're gonna do a concerto on each concert, one with a faculty member and one with a chamber group. So like that's in stone. I can't move that. Like those are in, plans are made, that's set and done. Next semester, Joel Puckett's coming in when Wind Symphony does Shadow of Sirius. So you know that I've planned that when Joel Puckett's in town, that cycle, I'll have something by Joel Puckett on the program so he can come in and work with the ensemble. So these are the things that I'm like, okay, this is a non-negotiable. They have to be in there, and then I can start to work around those things. The next thing I think of is the anchor piece. So the anchor piece is kind of the piece that I think of is going to be like the most musically substantial. Maybe it's a significant work, but it's a piece that is going to serve as the anchor for the program. It's going to kind of serve as the musical growing point and really like that substantial work that we'll use. And then from there, that's when I use the rest of my list. Oh no, so much suspense for this last question. Yeah. Then I think about the diverse student experience. So this is where it becomes a giant puzzle, right? Like I have the concertos in place. I have like, okay, I need to have a piece by Joel Puckett here. I need to have a piece by Sugar Lee here. Okay, now what does everything else look like? And that's where I go into that giant, really intentionally made pool of pieces. And that's where I make the programs. When I'm thinking about this diverse student experience, this is something that I know we've talked about in some of my classes too. I don't use themes ever. Themes are a way that really pigeonhole you into like, okay, I'm doing a theme on, like stars. Okay, then your list of pieces just went from 255 to like 20, right? So you have to really think about themes naturally emerge. I promise you, every concert I have has a theme. I didn't plan it with a theme. I just look at the pieces and go, oh yeah, I can pull a theme out of that. And there is a theme somewhere, but like, I highly recommend don't use a theme because that's when you really start to like pigeonhole yourself and you don't really think about this, right? The student experience is what I prioritize. That's number one. And everything else kind of falls into place. Man.
I got you, girl.
Professor Vecchio warned me. He said that this room was like intentionally fuzzy. Okay, so this is what my spreadsheet looks like for each concert. So this was the first Hindsley program that we did. So I list out every piece. I always have it do some fancy math to total the time for me. I usually shoot in a 5-minute window for Hindsley, I think 35 to 40 minutes. And everything from that original spreadsheet, I keep it formatted in the same way so I can just keep cutting and pasting. Okay, does this fit here? Does this fit here? I'm constantly cutting and pasting. There's like, similar to what Rachel had, like a dumping ground of pieces that I'm like, okay, welcome Sarah, and I'm constantly doing this and shuffling all of these pieces around. Something that I think about a lot, especially when, every time I'm teaching is, do I own it or do I need to purchase it, right? Like how much funds do I have to purchase these things with? I can't, especially when I was teaching, when I was first teaching my very first job, I had like $0 to buy music, right? So like I just had to figure it out or like, copyright people, borrow pieces from my friends, right? Like I just had to, so that's something to keep in mind too, that it's not, you have to figure out what's in your library as part of it too. And then similar to Rachel, then I just listen. I listen to it a lot of times and figure out these things, like what is most active for my percussionist, what solos are happening, am I highlighting enough people in different solos? And then this is, I create a rehearsal model. Okay, so I know Hindsley rehearsal is an hour and 50 minutes long. Can I fit every piece in there substantially enough? And if I can't make this rehearsal model, like I have enough time to rehearse these pieces every day, I haven't programmed right. I have to go back to the drawing board. So it's not just so much this in terms of time, but it's also this. Do I have enough rehearsal time for it? Okay. All right, when I listen for these 3 groups, which Rachel mentioned as well, right? Like I listen, number 1, for the student experience, which I've talked about a lot. I listen for me. Again, am I going to want to live with this music for this long? And not only as long as the rehearsal cycle, right? You have to start studying it way before then. So you're living with it for even longer. So like, is this going to be musically rewarding for me? And then I also think about the audience experience. The audience experience is important, right? They're the consumers of our music, but this is literally like the priority order that I put it in. Like, are the students gonna get the experience that they need to get? That's what's most important? Am I gonna be able to have a good experience that will support that, right? If I think that, students are gonna love a piece, if I listen to it, I'm like, oh God, I hate this. It's not gonna be a good rehearsal cycle for us, right? You have to think about how much you're gonna love it too. And the audience is important, right? But it's not the be all end all. When I go back, I'm gonna go back to the slide. Oh no. Yes. Yes. When I'm creating this, so like this program that I did for Heinsley this cycle, like Courtly Airs and Dances was our anchor. I knew that I wanted something with a different sound experience, which is where the Clifton Williams and Lydia Kwan came in. All three of those are very different sound worlds. The next piece is where I start to really think about the audience. I think about how am I going to welcome the audience in? Like they're sitting down, Heinsley's first in the program. What are they going to want to do to feel like, oh, man, I'm so happy I came today to hear some live music. That's where the Kirkpatrick came in. And then I also think about how are we letting them leave the concert, right? I try not to leave with anything too heavy or too, something that might be difficult for them to listen to. But I try to think, okay, I'm going to let them feel like they had an excellent experience at this concert, tied up with a bow, so that they want to come back again. So that's where the set of marches came in. So I don't really think about openers and closers. Sometimes I don't start with, these just end up being short, just how the program worked out. But it doesn't have to be that way. I just think about how do I welcome them in? How do I wish them out of the performance? And that's what I really think about in that listening piece, is how are they being welcomed in? How are they feeling when they leave?
Can I just say, when you're a school director too, when you have parents that love your concerts, it's a totally different culture than when they dread your concerts. I mean,
That's so true.
And so when they're excited about hearing your music and think like, oh, I love that piece that, and they get excited about a particular piece, or they can't wait to hear it again at concerts or whatever, it's a very different environment for the kids too, because then the parents are excited at home talking about they can't wait to go see the concert, et cetera, that kind of thing. So
that's huge. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then this is where the fun starts to happen. So I feel like I got a program. This is great. I love it. Then I look at the semester. And I go, okay, am I achieving what I need to achieve? Is there diversity in all parts of the semester? Then I look at the year. Is there everything that I want to achieve within the year in terms of student experience, those diversity of errors, styles, identities, all those things I talked about, right? Is there enough of this all across the year? And then I think multi-year, right? Like, what am I going to be doing next year? I'm already forming my list for Heinsley next year, right? Like, I'm constantly churning that. I had a teacher who used to call this eagle vision, right? You can't have chicken vision, which is like pecking at the moment. You have to have eagle vision. You have to think farther than the program you're doing now, right? If you are in chicken vision, you are thinking of this program right now. And sometimes that can paint you into corners. I think of the whole year because I'm not going to reprogram a composer again in the same year. I'm going to try to do a different composers on every concert. And maybe if I'm thinking of one concert at a time and I program a piece, but I'm like, oh man, that would have worked perfect on this program with this anchor piece. Well, I've already sunk myself, right? You have to think far enough ahead that everything is programmed, right? Heinsley programming is done for the year. Campus Grade programming done for the year. I might tweak things, right? I might go back and go, oh, actually, when I go back and listen, I might switch this. Like I haven't gone back to listen to the Heinley Spring programs yet. I'm going to do that. And I'll probably tweak a little bit, right? I might not always be set in stone, but once everything's set, I'm not afraid to tweak it. There's nothing worse than being like, I'm going to do this program no matter what. Like if you're sensing something, then just change it, right? There's like no law that says it's set in stone, okay? So the idea of this is really, it's all about the intentionality. Am I creating an intentional resource for myself? That's what that huge database is for. And then how am I intentionally putting this all together, okay? It takes a lot of time, like a lot of time. The listening takes a lot of time. And then anytime I think I have, like I said, I put 250 pieces for Heinsley right now, then it takes a lot of time to put it together and then listen to it. And then wait 2 days, and then listen again, and then say, oh, I don't like this now, and then go back and change it. I mean, it takes forever. There's nothing worse than trying to program a cycle as you're trying to finish another cycle. Yeah, there's just not enough time. So it takes time, but for you and for your students, it's worth it. It's worth it. Cool. I love it. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
That's a killer.
Yeah, we try.
It's like right on time.
Great time management skills. That's one thing I'm learning.
Oh.
All right, up next, please welcome Mr. Phil Carter.
How's it going? I'm Phil Carter. I'm the Assistant Director of Bands down at O'Fallon Township High School. So we are going to Midwest this year. And so when I was asked to talk about a part of rep here, it was really hard because the way Melissa and I pick rep for O'Fallon, it's completely collaborative. And I don't feel there's a formulaic way that we land on a program. I feel like we land on a tangent, which takes us to another tangent, which takes us to another tangent. And where we end is never where we started. The other thing that I think both of us think down at O'Fallon is talking rep is a ton of fun and selecting rep is terrifying. Because kind of like Rachel said, you're stuck with it. And so I love rep. I'm a band director because I fell in love with the rep. I'm not a band director because I wanted to be a teacher. I love teaching, but I'm here teaching music because I love music. And I think that that's always got to be in our mind when we're picking music, because you want that same thing for your students. You want the kids in your room to love what they're doing every day. So yes, you're thinking about technical aspects about all of this, but you're also thinking about what are they going to fall in love with. And so the way I figured that I would do this is I would just talk about all the conversations that we had that landed us where we are with what we're going to play at Midwest. And that's really the same conversations that Melissa and I will have for any concert cycle. And really going through this process has made us better programmers because of, I don't think I've ever listened to so much music as I have in the past 6 months. There we go. And I'll talk through this too. There's actually a lot of limitations when you go to Midwest. And I kind of like the limitations. I think it forces you to be more creative with what you're doing. So just to talk through what some of these are, you're limited to 45 minutes of music, which is a lot of music. We've never done a concert that long, except I think if you were to go to like the National Festival, I think that's about the same length. Half of your music must be written from the past 2 years, which is hard. Half of your music can be grade 4 through 6. The other half has to be 1 through 3, which presents challenges for us because we don't really play much 1 through 3 at the high school level. One piece has to be from an underrepresented minority group, which I think is really low. And I think that's a new requirement they put on there. I'll talk more about that later. If a grade 4 through 6 piece is over 10 minutes in length, you have to have 2 more from the grades 1 through 3 to offset that. You can only use 1 publisher twice on your program. Every other publisher has to be once. That's a consideration we almost never think about when we're programming. You can only use 1 manuscript, meaning commission that's not published. And then you can't play anything that's been played at Midwest in the past 2 years, which is really hard when half of your program has to be written from that time frame. Yeah.
And it can't suck. Okay.
That's hard. So our initial conversations went here. What's music that we're passionate about? One of the first things I asked Melissa I told Melissa is, when people walk away from that concert, they should associate some of these pieces with you and your band's performance. I mean, I remember sitting at Superstate a few years ago with Rachel and Melissa when Greg Bim played Tears. And every time I hear Tears, I associate it with him. It has to be, you have to be passionate about it. Because like Rachel said too, you're spending so much time with it. You have to care enough to get it right. You have to care enough to want to chase the perfection in that piece. You want to connect with it, because if you don't, your kids won't. I think that people love what other people are passionate about. So if a kid doesn't know band music because they don't listen to it on the radio, they're going to fall in love with what other people are in love with. If I get in front of my group every day excited to do the whole first suite, which I just finished with my band, and I was incredibly excited to do that with them. They've never heard that piece. Why do they care? But they see I'm excited about it, and then they got excited about it. So then next is what music will the students be passionate about? I tell you, I walked away from Midwest this past year thinking that standard rep was a bad word, because I don't think students necessarily connect with that music like we do. And I think that a lot of that music is part of the old system, the old way of doing things. And so I want to make sure that, yes, we're getting a healthy balance of that, but I'm also going to do music that they're connecting with as well. Music that fits the strengths of the students. We spent a ton of time thinking about that, especially when we were doing our anchor piece, which took us forever to find. We have really strong double reeds, alto saxophones, a great trumpet section, strong low reeds. We've landed, and I'll show you in a second exactly what the program is on Niagara Falls. But we just wanted to make sure that that was something we were thinking about for every piece we were doing. Commissions. Obviously, that's kind of an expectation when you walk into Midwest that you're probably going to hear some really new, if not premier pieces. And for that, we were thinking, well, what are the composers we love? What are the composers we have relationships with? Who are new voices that we want to hear in the repertoire? I think it was important for us that we didn't want to just do a composer that was, completely already. We didn't want to necessarily do a Mackey. There are a lot of Mackey pieces out there already. He doesn't need this stage like other composers need right now. So we were highly aware of that. I loved how you were talking about different sound worlds, because we're really cognizant of that. Making sure that we're hearing a balance of traditional and contemporary tonalities and textures going on. Anniversaries of composers or pieces. We thought about that too. I don't think we landed on any pieces that had anniversaries, but my favorite piece that did not make our final Midwest list was Princess Leia's theme, the Hunsberger arrangement of Star Wars trilogy. Because again, we had great players that fit the strength of that piece. We had a great flute soloist, oboist, horn player, and it's the 90th anniversary of John Williams. And it's a completely legit arrangement. We loved it. We sight read it last fall, but it didn't make the end cut. But we did think about that. And then also the message of the piece. I think so much of what we talked about is how, again, the director can connect to it, how your students can connect to it, but it also has to be the audience aspect of it as well. So that's all of what we were thinking. I'm going to show you what we actually ended up with. Oh, actually, before I do that, I think a lot of this has to do with who we are, has to be our first consideration. So like, again, Rachel said, it has to be authentic to you. Her colleague did a presentation last year at both Midwest and IMEC about reflecting who you are, who your group is, and then does what you're doing in the class actually reflect that? So we actually did that at O'Fallon. We looked at the balance of male and female. And if you think about most band concerts, it's highly skewed male composers, right? And you look at the music program, 56, 43. Now that includes choir, so I'm guessing band's probably closer to 50-50. But if you look at our composers that our school did last year, that was 87 or 85% male and 14 female. And we looked at that right as we're, doing our Midwest programming and going, this doesn't line up. And I think even more to our point, Melissa, the lead conductor of this, is a female conductor. And I think she's one of the only female conductors at Midwest this year. And I'm pretty sure if you went to Midwest last year and you got the hard copy of the program, they had this page that was just dedicated to female conductors that had gone to Midwest before. And again, the list is not as large as what you would expect from white male. So we were highly aware of all of this as we went into programming. And again, you can compare where we are at with our demographics. Whoops. And it doesn't match with what we're doing with our composers. And this was just to hold ourselves accountable. That's what we did last year. We can't change it. But we wanted to make sure that if we were going to be on this stage where people are kind of looking to us as what's the latest, greatest, what should we be playing, we didn't want it to look like this anymore. And we don't want our programming to look like this anymore. I mean, it's not about finding token composers. It's about your female students being able to see themselves in the music they're playing. And we weren't doing a good enough job on that. Going on. So priorities for us. Diversity. I said that one of their requirements was you have to do one. That by no means was going to be good enough for us. Number two, I always ask this question too when we were looking at programming was, I know when I look at Midwest programs or going to any concert, I'm kind of looking for what piece makes me excited to be there. Like, is the Navy band playing music for Prague? Okay, I'll go. It's stuff like that. I'm always thinking of that. And then we wanted to also have pieces that people would walk out not knowing and going, I want to play that. That was super cool. And again, we wanted music that we could connect to and that meant something to us, our students, and the audience. So I don't think anyone's seen this, but I'm going to kind of talk through what basically our final program ended up being. We ended up with, again, talking about the female importance to us since we have a female conductor. 4 out of 10 ended up being female composers, and it wasn't always that way. I mean, we were, again, you go through so many iterations of this. I think at one point we had 2 female composers on there, and we looked at it and we said, that's not good enough. And so we just reevaluated, we figured it out. We're opening up with a piece called Fanfare Descensus. That's from a composer named Kim Archer. She actually is local to us. I think some of you played Fanfare Politea at U of I last year. The piece, and she explained it to us, she wrote it in July, and dissensus means disagree, and she said it just had to go with what was going on in the world at that point, maybe hearings, I think, is what she was thinking at that point. And my whole point with all this is there's some sort of connection that gets us excited about it, or connection to the composer of the piece. Cape Breton Postcard was actually recommended. Dr. G is really close with Elizabeth Peterson. She recommended that piece. Female composer, it's awesome. And it's grades 1 through 3. Niagara Falls, that's probably where we started with the program. We wanted to find that big monster piece that we would build around. And again, I already talked about that. That was just really finding a piece that fit the players well. The other connection for us, because we wanted a connection to that piece, was we're also really big in the marching band world at O'Fallon. And the first time we made finals, Niagara Falls was our closer. So it means something to both of the directors, which we love. County Tune from Country Perry is our grade 1. We found that because it was in a composition award winner. That's another list that we are looking at as well. There are a million composition awards ranging from, your highest art piece to what's a great piece for a young band. And we're looking at all of those too. Fantasia in G, the connection there. As we've been looking at that for a while, Tim Marr, who wrote it, is retiring this year. Tim Marr, and we didn't have it on this at this point, Tim Marr is going to come and conduct that for us. Fantasia in G was actually premiered at Midwest, and it's kind of cool that he's retiring now and getting to do it the year that he is retiring. AO by Kataj Copley. Do we know Kataj Copley at all? Yeah. He had a piece premiered last year by Lockport. Really young composer. I think some of you, again, played it at U of I in Living Color, yeah? Yeah. It is, again, kind of that diversity piece as well, because he's writing from a different perspective. AO is a reading in Black culture, and he's using hip hop and jazz in that piece influenced. So we're really excited to play that. That's going to be a world premiere. Julie Giroux is a composer that we love at O'Fallon. We played One Life Beautiful, Rift and Wed. We tried to get her on a commission. She didn't have time, but she has this brand new symphony that's out. And one of the cool things that we're going to do with that's never been done in Midwest is it has multimedia. So the 2 screens that you normally have on either side of the band, we'll be putting up a video. And the video follows the conductor for this. It's no longer the conductor follows the video. There's technology out there now where the video will follow the conductor, which is really exciting. Forevermore, we actually found that piece 2 days before the deadline was due. Again, it's a female band director in Texas, and she wrote the piece for her students that she had during COVID. And it has some really cool harmonic moments at the end for being a grade 2. We heard it once, we fell in love with it. made the program. Black Horse Troop. The connection kind of for the next two pieces is James Keene. James Keene last year was in our band room over Zoom because he was super helping us behind the scenes of what we would need to do to get prepared and help elevate our program. For the march, you have to have a march on the program too. What he said to do, and this is kind of funny, he said just look for an edited version. So you get 2020, so it counts in your new pieces. So that is an old piece. It got to go on our new list. Yeah, and that's why that ended up there. Now, James Keene was also supposed to guest conduct on our program. And 2 weeks before he died, he actually called Dr. G, and he said, this is the piece I want to do. She Walks to the Fair. It's Luigi Zanninelli, who also has done Log in Love, which we've done and we love. This piece was actually a movement from a piece that's already been written. I forget what it comes from, but it's gorgeous. And it was written for his granddaughter, who I think had some health issues. So we have left that on the program. We will leave a note that that was supposed to be done by James Keene. The last piece, do we know Oscar Navarro? He does Downey Overture, but I'd say mainly what else you see from him is really collegiate ensembles playing like concertos. I think I saw Northwestern do his clarinet concerto a few years ago. I guess it's a few years ago now, but then I think a lot of people are doing his oboe stuff too. And we loved his music. So we got on his website and just saw if there was anything fun and different that no one's doing. And we found this piece, and it's like a Latin fantasy overture, but completely authentic music where they're like getting up and there's horn moves and they're standing and they're moving around, and we loved it. And we thought, what a fun way to end our concert with this really upbeat Latin fantasy that we think people are going to love. And it's also going to feature your percussion professor here.
Professor Flores.
Yeah, he's playing with us. Drum set on that one. So point being on all this, there's a connection. I hope you could tell that when I was talking about this, we're excited about it. And nothing would be on this program if we weren't. How did we get here? And this is just a lot of rehashed stuff that you've already heard. I love this website. Y'all been on winrep.org? Yeah, I mean, that is where I will go on a million tangents. We're looking at concert programs, past Midwest programs, CBDNA lists, TMEA programs, AVA conference programs. And kind of like Dr. Fleming said, we're not always looking for pieces we're doing, but if we like a composer, I'm going to get on their website and see if they have anything that's written at that level. Composition awards, they have lists for that on that website. Anniversaries, they have lists for that. You can also sort by categories. So one of my favorite categories to sort by lately is socially relevant. There's a category for that. You can find pieces right there. Collegiate band websites. I look at all the time at what like these schools are playing. That's how I knew, and I didn't look it up for this at all, but I knew that you've done Living Color. I knew that you had, I forget what the other one was, or Fanfare Politea. I knew that you had done that because we're always looking at what you guys are doing. Because we want to see who your professors are playing, because we want to steal ideas from them. Let's see. Music publisher websites, we look at that very carefully. A lot of time if you go on like a JW Pepper, it's usually sorted by like featured, which isn't the list that I want to look at because they're trying to sell it to you. But like Rachel said too, we're always listening to publisher YouTube playlists. In fact, one of my favorite Hal Leonard websites or YouTube playlists isn't the American one. They have a European one, which is actually way more diverse. Yeah, the European Hal Leonard playlist is great. Midwest Sheet Music. That's the giant booth at Midwest and IMEC that sells scores. And he has a regular newsletter that he will email out occasionally of stuff that he's come across, because that's what he does. Lists. I look at several programs, MBA, colorfulmusic.com, a million others. And I also look at conducting symposium lists, because that's music that people spend hours with in a week. And if Mallory Thompson thinks that it's worth spending hours with in a week, I'm probably going to agree with her. So I want to see what she's doing for a week long at that. a lot of talking to colleagues, and not just that, you want to know what they're playing. It helps more if they've been in your band room and heard your groups. Because if they've been in your band room and heard your groups, they're going to know your strengths and be able to not just suggest music they like, but music that they like and think will fit your group. And again, we did more listening than we've ever done in our lives to get here. Any thoughts? Don't just stick with what you know, take risks. God, I was at a Midwest session last year, and I think it was Courtney Snyder. Someone kind of raised the question of, well, we're not playing diverse music because not enough of it is good, or it was something phrased like that. And her response was, well, we've played Trash by White Males for years. and that's how you find what's good. Every time I pick a piece of music, I'm rejecting every other piece. Richard Floyd said that to me once when he was clinicking my group. And if I am going to pick a piece of music that's standard rep, that's another voice that I could have played and brought into my repertoire, and people could have seen that and brought into theirs. So I think a lot about that. Don't just stick to what you know. Don't just do what you did in high school. I've seen plenty of people do that. I've seen plenty of people just play the music they played in college. Take risks. Let's see. Have smart people in your band rooms. I already said that. I wish someone would have told this to me when I was in college. It's not about building your repertoire list. Man, I walked out of undergrad thinking, I want to do all of these pieces. And it's not about that. Your ideal program should be the one that best fits the group that's in front of you at that point in time. I think Brian Wiss was doing a podcast once, and someone asked the question that I'm sure we've all thought about, what's your last program going to be? And I've thought about, I don't think about that much anymore, but when I was young and had my favorite things, I thought about that. But I think really what you need to be thinking about is, and his answer was, my last program is going to be the music that fits the group in front of me at that point in time, because that's where you're going to be most successful. Make it mean something for everyone involved. I know Dr. Fleming said that as well. You have to be thinking about all the parties. Last year, obviously we had, and the Ukraine thing is still going on. At O'Fallon, we did the Ukraine national anthem followed by that Kyiv 2022. It meant something for the director. It meant something for the students. It meant something for the audience. And that was a different experience for them to walk out of. I'm also always thinking of maybe non-traditional ways that I can introduce a piece. We did Give Us This Day last year with our second band. And again, at the core of every Myslanka piece is kind of this idea of peace. And if you've ever heard him talk, that's what he talks a lot about. So at the same concert where we're, have this Ukraine idea going on with one band, we did Give Us This Day. And I had David Myslanka recordings introducing that piece, talking about peace. I didn't say anything. I played a recording, gave a downbeat. I think if we can find ways to make our music connect to everyone in the room, it's going to mean way more to everyone. And that's just kind of what I'm going to leave with. Everything I talked about and somehow had a connection. And it was about the relationship to the player. It was about the relationship to me. Hopefully it's about the relationship to the audience. And again, I'm here because I love music and I fell in love with the rep. And it gets me really excited to talk about. But I think the connection and the relationship always has to be at the heart of what we're doing, because that's why we're here. So, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, one more.
I haven't done a PowerPoint in like over 2 years. I'm retired. So yeah, I came back early. So I'm Karen DeBush. I taught at Urbana Middle School for 30 years and retired in 2020, but I put it in before COVID. And so I was able to plan my last concert, but it never happened. It was sad, but I got recognized in so many good ways. I have nothing to complain about. So I'm taking this from a session that was done last January at IMEA or IMEC. It was done with several band directors. It didn't go because I got to do it. Okay. So Scott Casagrande, some of you guys know him. He's retired from Plainfield. Brian Covey from Lockport, myself, Katrina Fitzpatrick, who's from Morton, does a marvelous job. Patrick Maneri, he is really active in Music for All, has done high school bands. Should be teaching music in my opinion. Jen Motorbell is from the Southern Illinois McHenry University, and Todd Stalter, who does a lot of compositions and teaches at the Eureka schools. So they pulled us together and we did a panel, and it's amazing. Oh, this is hard, so yeah. Okay, so he asked us questions like, where do you draw the line for being challenging enough or too hard? That is harder than you think. Because I like to listen with my band director ears, the ones where I want it to sound a certain way. So the middle school people, don't skip steps. You have to look at your instrumentation. Range is an ability of your ensemble, first and foremost. You have to keep all the parts engaging. I'm sorry, I would not want to be a middle school trombone player. Try to include new concepts within your music. Look for teachable concepts, social and otherwise, just like you were just saying. And you have to know your kids. You have to know your ensemble to pick music, and even then you mess up. High school, Scott said this, a gut feeling, but you have to love the music to teach it. You have to know your students' capabilities. Sight reading, that's a big one. I always sight read a lot with my kids because I think it's important. You have to keep your weakest players in mind too, so they don't fail. You have to keep the sound tone in mind. The technique's gonna come most of the time, but the sound has to be there. And the majority of the ensemble should be comfortable performing the piece in the end. But you have to think about those things as you're choosing music, because there is no magic formula. That's the way she's pressed it. So challenging students to learn a piece when they first listen and thinks it's too difficult. I'm sure Rachel agreed that middle school think kids when they sight read go, no way, right? You know, it's hard. So how do you present new literature that doesn't make them instantly, oh, I can't play that. So middle school people, sight read often. It's good for them, whether they think so or not. Make sure your kids can read music. I teach lessons and I can't believe how many kids don't know their note names and their rhythms and figures. I'm serious, and you think they do, but you can't always get that. Scales, that's the bottom line for everything, right? So you have to start teaching them. And they're all in the method books, so why not? Rhythm patterns, I am a big person on counting because I struggled with that when I was young. And so I am a person who makes my kids write in the counting and make them clap and count. They hate it, but I'm okay with it. Guided listening, you have to teach them how to listen and what to listen for. That's your job because they haven't done it before me. You have to teach them how to practice carefully, because how many of you guys still practice things too fast? Yeah. I still do. I want it done. You have to start, if you, so I did play green sleeves in middle school, Rachel.
Well, you know, it was, you know.
But I had the movements to pull it off.
Yeah.
And we did a really good job. And it was probably the third time I'd done it, but I'll tell you what, you have to know your kids can play those high notes. Because if they can't play them comfortably with a good sound, it's going to suck. That's all I can say. So you have to start with the attainable section where they all play, because they're not gonna buy into it otherwise. You have to hear them individually. If you're gonna pull off something like that, you've got to hear your kids. It takes time, but you have to make sure they understand what you're doing. I model a lot as I teach, not for the notes, but for musicality, for phrasing, for breath support. Kids don't get it most of the time. It takes a long time to teach that. And hype and confidence. 1 year, I've done a few crazy things in my life. 1 year we did, you know the arrangement of what is it? You know the
American Figure.
Yes, you know the Orchard Marriage Figure. We did it 1 year at IMEA. I don't know if you guys know Joe Manfredo. He was teaching with me at the time. And I'm like, oh, I want to do this, but oh my God, I don't think I can. He's like, just do it. So he challenged me. I'm like, okay. But boy, we had to work on that. We had extra woodwind rehearsals, and they ended up playing it fine, but it was a lot to ask out of it. This was an audition group, but it was a lot to ask. Today, that would not probably happen these days because COVID has really hurt programs. High school, college, listen without the music. I do that too, middle school. It's a multi-day process. You can't do it all at once. Break down meters, rhythms, notes, so everybody understands what's going on. Some say to hear the recording, some say don't hear the recording. I hear recordings because I want them to understand the style and tempos. It's not going to tell them the notes and interpretations. Some say listen a few days into rehearsing so that they develop their own musical taste. In middle school, we're not there yet. Encourage. I mean, that is the bottom line. You have to encourage. If you don't believe in them, they're not going to do it. And you have to teach the concepts. That's your job. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. Am I talking too fast? Okay. Red flags. How do you know when is when, like, oh my God, I can't do this. This is the worst piece I've ever done. They're not going to play it. How do you know? Sometimes you don't. Well, you do, but you don't quit soon enough. So like, it's true. You try so hard to get it, and it's just like, no, this isn't gonna work. It happens. Does it happen to you? Guys? Yeah.
Yeah, I've pitched a piece.
Inner parts are missing. If those second and third clarinets, trumpets can't play their parts, you're doomed. It's not gonna sound good. Tone quality. If they're struggling in places that are just too hard for them, their tone will show it. Consistent lay, it's actually key signature issues. If they can't figure out the key signs, it's not gonna sound good. It's just every day you get up there and you know it's not gonna be good and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And they can't do it either, you know. And you don't wanna be mean to them about it because it's probably your fault. The students hate the music, don't worry, they'll be vocal about it. Mine are, I mean, ew. Sometimes I win that fight though. Balance and blend simply don't have because they have no clue how to put that together as an ensemble. And the most difficult aspect is knowing when to stop. Because you just think you can do it in one more day. And sometimes you get bitten by that one. High school, college, same thing. Inner parts are missing, tone quality. How did I do L 2 times? The runs aren't attainable. If you're a clarinet player, I'm a clarinet player, and those runs are like, ooh, and you're like, can't do it. You know that feeling? Yeah. It's not what students hate the music, balance and blend aren't happening. The most difficult aspect is knowing when to give in. I'm stubborn, I don't do that very well. Rehearsal time. Do you have rehearsal time to pull it off? And then understanding the breadth of the piece, you have to kind of know that beforehand. You will make mistakes though. You just will. That didn't work this time. Okay, something that came up with this group was, do you consider the personality of the band as well as the individual students? Teaching middle school, if I didn't consider the personality, I would be crazy. Middle school kids it's an art unto itself. But I came into this not ever wanting to teach. I was a performance major, clarinet, here at the U of I was doing my DMA. And I got an aid job in the schools. And I decided, hey, I like this. It's kind of fun. How did I know what would happen? I didn't. And I got so fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. But I walked in with a different head of knowledge. I had Howard Klug for a professor, if you know who he is. He doesn't play games. Very strict, very tough. And I had Jim Keen for band director. Don't mess with Jim Keen. So I had these people who are very strict and wanted what they wanted. And I'm kind of like that. But I watch people now, like I played in summer band and everybody's so happy. Like that. So, but you have to buy into the kid's personality. You have to know when to laugh. You have to know when to cry. You have to know when to say when. It's a big part of teaching middle school, I think. You got to consider their potential. So if you know you've got these great flute players and great French horn players, use them. Make sure they're challenged. There's pieces that do that, but you have to do a lot of time. Full ensemble growth and maturity based on the selection. Again, you have to know where you want your group to grow, what you want them to accomplish. When I'm doing 6th grade, I always include something with dotted quarter notes because they hate them. They do. Counting dotted quarter notes is the hardest thing in 6th grade, I think, because it's that subdivision. You have to consider the potential if you have soloists. So when you read an overture, and I had to know that I had a clarinet player and a flute player and a French horn player that could handle those solos, because otherwise that would have been stupid, right? And then often the personality of the ensemble just helps you choose the right music. And sometimes you can find something fun to play. I give them choices. I'll say, I have 3 pieces. Which one do you like the best? Because it's their band too. And I want them to take ownership. Does that help? I put some pictures up here because I love pictures. And I should put percussion up here, but you know that happened. How do you keep those percussion players engaged? How do you choose music? At the middle school level, it's hard because they get that boom, chuck, 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 or boom, ba-da-da-da. Is that challenging all day long, every day? So you got to find ways. One, you got to alternate your parts with the kids. They all have to learn the ballads. They all have to do all the things they don't like. That's just part of life. You have to have one piece per cycle in a concert that really challenges them, so you can send them out with somebody to work. And because they need it. Make sure they have other assignments. Don't let them sit idle back there. Am I wrong?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You have to challenge them without scaring them most of the time. And patience. My percussionists and I, we've had instances where it's been pretty interesting, but I love them and they knew it too. So, but you have to have patience because they're learning all these instruments and they have to keep the beat. Imagine being a bass drummer in 6th or 7th grade, going boom, boom, and then the director's all over you. You're going too slow, you're going too fast. You have to really work with them and be patient. High school can be really challenging for transcriptions. If you've played a lot of the old transcriptions for band, you know that the percussion parts aren't great. Bring in a percussion instructor. We were fortunate in our program to have a percussion class and 2 teachers per class, so the assistant would often take out the percussionists. Why not teach them, they're there. Utilize a percussion ensemble. I know our high school does that. I think a lot of high schools do that. If you can do that, it's a great way to get kids skills. And then, like I said, select one piece that challenges them. I think this is one of the hardest things to do as a band director is keeping your percussionists engaged, not in trouble, because they do like to play, and you want to keep them happy because they really are, you can't have a band without them, right? So these just pictures of kids, the different I taught, they're pretty weird kids. And I love them. Okay, so you overprogrammed. We kind of touched on this already. What do you do next? I've done that, I'm guilty. Do you change, do you move on? I've done both, depends on the situation. You have to weigh in, measure each time. Students do a lot of miraculous things at the last minute. I have learned that at least my kids, the last minute they pull stuff out of the bag that I didn't know they had. But I can't plan on that, You always gotta have a backup plan. You really have to have one. And you gotta blame yourself because you're the one who made the choice half the time. You have to think about your end goal. Are you teaching this for teaching purposes? Is this something that they'll come out better or is it something that's gonna hurt them? You've gotta balance it out with attainable pieces. I think you've heard that several times. Help the students be responsible. How many did practice every day in middle school? How many guys practice? No, I'm not even gonna ask. I struggle with the practicing part as a retired person. I have a dog, I have an excuse. I've learned over the years that kids can rise to the challenge. I've tried things that some people would say are absolutely insane and the kids do it. But I also had a very talented group that could do it. If I had a group that was just 6th grade and really struggling, I would look at it very differently. So you have to look at your group. And pushing through for the goal experiences, that was a college person who wrote that. Make them feel good about their effort and progress. Always, always, always. Experience. It just takes time to figure it out. It does. You don't get it your first year, your second year, or your 30th year. You just got to keep working at it. Teach the students about why are we, I'll record them and they go, oh, we sound like that. I go, mm-hmm. And they go, oh, that's terrible. I go, mm-hmm. And you have to help them teach their ears too, because they think they're doing fine, and they are, but they just don't, they have to train their ears to do those things. Make it a learning experience. That's what we do, we're educators. And never embarrass your kids. And I can't say I'm not guilty of that because I have. But you don't want to because these are kids you want to stay in the program all the way through and into college. Okay? So, and we tend to listen. Do you guys have band director ears versus the ears that hear what's really out there? You hear what's in your mind and then you kind of start getting reality checks. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, be careful about those band director ears because they hear what you want to hear. That can get you in trouble too. I thought I had it. All right, so making music cuts, say you have to cut a little piece out. Everybody was pretty firm on saying, don't do it. I've done it a couple times, there's a version of a slow piece and the ending is just awful. And I'm like, we're not playing that. So I kind of rewrote the ending so it could end very pretty instead of having this lame, weird ending come back. But because otherwise it was a great piece. Maybe you need to rearrange your parts a little bit. Sometimes you have to. You just have to. Your kids can't play it and otherwise it's fine. But I wouldn't do it for a festival because judges might frown on it. Depends on the situation. But if you're home and you can cut a little bit, that's okay. But it's not something you want to make a habit. You want to be really careful about what you do and very thoughtful about it. I got to go to Alaska this last year. I got to do a festival band, and we had to choose the music. And I came in the clarinet's gonna go with break, and actually it's a U of I alum who's there. Homer Alaska. It's cool. He was my student teacher. That's how I got to go. So, do you program pieces you don't like? No way. Not if I got to listen to it for 6 weeks. Not a chance. I don't want to get up. The only song I hate is Ode to Joy because we do it every year. But it's a family favorite and it's got to be done. And I just go up and I say, I hate this piece, but let's do it. But it's just because it was overdone. But you don't want to. It's you have to live with it. Oh, yeah. There's a trick to this. So do you think about this? Do you subscribe to the idea that if your band can't sight read a piece, it shouldn't be performed? I think no, because I think all of us felt that way, because what would we ever play if we couldn't sight read it? And if they can sight read it, well, nobody sight reads anything perfectly. You know, there's so much to teach, even in the easiest of songs, the musicality, the tone, the balance, the blend. Yeah, but I don't subscribe to that at all, because middle school kids, at least, don't sight read well. You have to talk them through it. But I think that was pretty universal.
We sight read in chunks too.
Exactly,
We don't go
yeah.
straight through anything ever with my.
So I found this little character here. Where do I start? You're a first year band director, you're like, oh crud, what do I do? I know I felt that way. Right now, things you can do. Get involved in your local schools. Find out where the kids are at, because if you don't know that, you're gonna learn something really fast. Music camps, one of the coolest things I've done, I worked with ISYM for like 13 years as a sectional person, and I worked at Luther, I went to Luther College also, and I taught music camp there for a long time. So it's watch people who know what they're doing, get influenced by them. I saw Greg Bim conduct, I saw you. You know, I learned so much, I got ideas for literature, some of which worked, some didn't. But it's a great way to watch rehearsal techniques to get ideas for literature. It's just such an easy one and a fun one. Check out, I think that you've heard all this. Check out programs from organization contests and festivals. Be nosy. It's okay. This is where you learn. And then you go listen, you go, ooh, I don't like that. But you have to figure that out. Go to IMEC Midwest and listen. You know, go to whatever kind of festivals and conferences you can, because listening is the biggest thing you can do. And hours and hours. I have sat in many car rides listening to band music and flipping a quick note.
Cars are the best.
Yeah, they're the best place. You're driving, you might as well turn on. If you need to take continuing education, I think as an older teacher, my most influential educational development was CMP, the Comprehensive Music Through Performance. I learned so much from those people because we worked together. We shared ideas on literature. We had to plan ideas and get projects and stuff like that to make things more interesting for the kids. One time several years ago, maybe more than that, a guy, oh my gosh, Ted Ligo calls me up. So talk to me about this certain piece. It was Greek folk song dances. I'm like, why are you calling me? You're the, you know. And like, but he was just wanting to pick my brain about it. And I thought that is so cool that he would call me, right? And I know I relied on so many people as I became an educator to do that for me. Did I mention? Listen to a lot of music. Okay. It's a lot of work. It's not a joke. It takes hours. And these two women, these guys are all more organized than I am. Some of my favorite resources, Stanton Sheet Music has a jukebox. And so I would just, as I was planning years, I would just go, okay, I'm looking at this for this year. That way I didn't have to put it on some paper I would never find. So for me, that was a great place to put things. And they have a lot of good music on there. But don't listen to the editor's list. They're just trying to sell music. You know, you have to do what's right for you. And yeah, it takes time. Ohio has a great list. Wisconsin is a great list, but they tend to have Wisconsin composers. So J.W. Pepper is great. I wish they had a little place where you could put things. I've listened to lots of music on J.W. Pepper, for sure. But you can find things. The editor's choice can be pretty good. But I go back to a lot of times it's not the editor's choice, but it's like the good old favorites one. Do you know what I'm talking about?
They're like basic.
Basic
library.
literature, yeah. And there are things like Air for Band, which kids hate to play, okay? It's a great piece, but kids hate it. It's hard to teach. Really. I just learned how to use one of these. I'm teaching part-time right now. Okay. Hello, oh, that is the last one. Is this the last one? I thought, because I might be the, Yeah, I think, wait. Well, I put something up, but is it the last one you have?
That's probably the last one.
Okay, so some other things I would look at are like, NBA has stuff. CMP, if you go to their website, they have tons and tons and tons of resources. I have done some projects with kids to make pieces more meaningful. I'm a story person. So I want kids to know and understand what they're playing. I think that's so important. NBA has great resources. And the other thing I will tell you is keep trying to learn as much as you can. You never know it all. You will never know it all. You will think you know it all, and somebody will tell you that you don't. Education isn't an 8 to 5 job. I wish it were. But the big thing we have is being human beings with our students. I know for me, the transition from being a teacher and being Mr. Bush, going to be Karen, was going to be tough. Because your life consumes you when you're a director. I think you guys are starting to see that, right? So you have to take care of that, but it's hard. The relationships we have with our students, that's where it's at. That's where it's at 100%. Your room needs to be safe. It's the key to our success, the buy-in, and keeping the fun and joy in our profession. Not even mentioning, we are one of the safest places in the building for our kids. School is not easy right now. But I have to show you, my retirement gift is my dog. This is Rosie. She is a pain in my butt, but she's a little golden doodle, and she has changed my life. And then I got to go up to the Cascades last year, and that was cool. But she keeps me real now. But thank you for having me.
All right, well, we have about a half hour left if, sorry. If our guests want to come up to the front, we have time for a Q&A. So think of questions. Here's that last slide.
Oh, and that one, this is the best series ever. It's complicated, but the young kid ones, if you're doing young kid music, you can hear it. You can, right now they used to have some lesson plans online, but it's such a great resource that I left in the middle school band room when I retired. I
think a lot of those now too, you can go to that website and purchase the individual piece.
Right,
Yeah,
because
you
the
don't
books are
have-
pricey.
Yeah, the
I
books are
started going
expensive.
to grade 2 once this summer, and I'm listening to like every single grade 2 on the list, and I've marked.
But remember, grades does not, the grade level on music does not indicate how hard or easy it is.
No,
You can see a grade 1 and it's really hard. It's like, what the heck are these things?
some of the people that write reviews for those books aren't teaching at that grade level.
And all schools are different. So like, if you're in Texas, and I'm not bashing Texas, they start all their kids homogeneously in groups, and they move really fast. And when we have the kids all together, some move as fast. So it depends on your district and what you can do, and then they do ability based
Immediately after 6th grade, so they can move a little faster.
right? And they have lots of lessons.
All right.
The series is in the Harding Library. There's like a whole bunch of them. Professor Vecchio also has like the whole thing in his office too. So if you're just curious.
And if you go online, their website will give you, you can get a complete listing that you can print out that's continually updated. So you can, and then if you take that list and you go to like Pepper, you can listen to everything, almost everything.
One of the fun things in the book though are the prefaces of what the band directors write, because they talk to you about their feelings and thoughts of making the band program work. And I always thought that was helpful to think of another idea or way to do things.
All right, what questions do we have? Yeah.
Ryan, you're in charge of calling people.
Oh, Emily, go ahead.
All right, I have a question for you. So I saw on the spreadsheet you have this like little holding pen section.
Yeah.
What kind of music are you putting in there? Is it pieces you want to program, or is it like a certain genre
The
of
holding
music?
pen is anything I think I might want to use for the year, but I haven't decided where to put it. Or, maybe it fits this year, but I like it, but it might go into next year's, or it's not on my big list of things I love, but I know it might fit in. And then the holding pen stuff that I don't end up actually slotting, I'll just copy and paste that into next year's holding pen and it might get used. And then I have like a real life holding pen of like on my shelf at home. I've got like 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, currently doing, like they're all sorted then physically that way too. And then I have like the giant holding pen at the bottom of ones that, and there's ones that have sat there for years that just always keep getting rotated back into that because they just never quite they never fit. They're like the Toy Story, like the toy, misfit toys. They never quite come out of the morning pile. But it's just waiting for a spot where they would fit, maybe. So
It's gotta be with the right group.
yeah, sometimes it just doesn't fit the group. And you know how you were saying, I think the older your group too, the more set your program for the year, the longer out you can plan, because their change and development isn't as drastic as a young group is. My 8th graders are gonna change a lot more than, say, kids in your band are not gonna develop and change as much as like their range can develop so much, or suddenly like, oh, they're really coming together with their rhythmic understanding. So I might have to vary what I was thinking on that last program. You know, I have in my mind what I think that last program is gonna be, but I don't set it until I see how I don't set program 4 until I see how program 3 ended up going. I have in my mind what I think it might be, but it's not rock solid until we actually see the success level of what we're currently working on.
One of the cool things you can do with young bands is record them the first day, because it's pretty bad usually. And then 3-4 months later, show them where they came, because they need to see that in their heads.
And just a whole like growth mindset, the Carol Dweck, like you have to go in with a growth mindset mentality of everything you do, particularly with young and high school bands. Otherwise, it's just such a depressing, because every cycle, every new level of music, you're starting over. And some kids have a really hard time dealing with that of challenge. This is hard again. And I said, that's what music is endlessly. It's hard, I can't do it, and then I can. And then it's hard, I can't do it, and then I can. And there are children who have never experienced that before and have a very difficult time with that. So the whole ensemble has to be that growth mindset mentality constantly.
And a lot of kids who are in band are pretty darn smart.
They're used to
And they're used to getting
achievers,
it without thinking, like they have it. And so suddenly they do run up against a challenge and they have to learn how to deal with that. And
It's real.
How do you guys like program with new groups, whether it's like you have a new job or it's an incoming class or there's shifts? Like what do you guys like have like I guess like a time where you just get to know the band, or like is there methods to that? So.
You just went through this. What do you
No.
think?
I ask everyone all the questions, like people who conducted the group before, people who've been around the group before, people who have institutional knowledge of anything. Anyone I can, I ask questions. If you have access, which hopefully some places do, what was the program in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years? Like what did they play? When I got hired to do Hinesley, I went through the last 10 years of programming and I tracked what they played, how long each concert was, what composers they had done, what grade levels everything. Like what solos were featured, everything. Just so I can get a sense of like what were the historical strengths of the group, like what can they do well. And then in addition to that, once you know the programming, then if you have access, what are the recordings? Can I listen to them? What was actually successful? Like, because they can say we did this program, but like, what was the actual success of that program, right? Like, so that is huge. So those are the things that I like draw on first. Sometimes you don't have access to that. My very first teaching job, I didn't. I was thrown in kind of at the last minute of the school, and I had access to nothing. Programs, what they play for. So I just filled a folder with a wide range of things, and then that helped me figure it out. Like what I just had to figure it out. But then I just put a whole bunch of stuff on the plate to see what they can do.
And with younger kids, you have a method book. I don't really start sheet music with like my 6th graders who play like twice a week, and they really have to be retaught a lot of things because you want to bring them closer together. So I use the method book a lot so I can determine where they're at.
And even high school, you can use a lot of like warm-ups and chorales, and there are some good method books that are not, babyish, that you can get them playing, and hand out a bunch of like grade 2.5, 3 stuff, just to get and say, let's just sight read, and you can start gauging where they're at.
I feel like high school too, you could be an advantage if you're walking into a program that has a marching band over the summer, because then you're kind of getting to figure out the players over the summer, and then when you're actually planning for the fall, you kind of know. One of the first things I always ask for too is a roster, because anytime there is director turnover in a public school, a lot of times there is people that decide they don't want to do band. So I'm looking at instrumentation too, and making sure that the pieces that I have in my head that I want to play are actually going to work with the instrumentation that I'm going to have.
That roster is really important because that gives you the opportunity to chase after kids who may have quit.
Yep.
Even though that's not really cool, we do it anyway.
So yeah, call them up, just say, hey, we'd love to have you
I
back.
see your name on here, is there a mistake?
Yeah, I want to introduce myself. I'm the new director and I see you play tenor sax. I'd love to have you be part of our program.
Thank you.
But I also do a lot of guest directing where I go in like blind and they aren't always very strong groups because it's a lot of middle school groups. So I have just a set of about 20 pieces that I know I can make work no matter what. And I know how to edit them and rewrite and change and tweak things so that if I send this list out and I give it to people, I say, here, pick something off of this. I know if they pick something off that list, those are my, like, these will work no matter, like, fire and brimstone can be happening during the concert. There's a cat, there's like only, whatever. I can make that concert work. So you probably want to have in your toolbox a handful of pieces that like maybe from your student teaching, talk to who you student teach with. What are like, these work no matter what. Kids will buy into these pieces. These will sound good, kind of when you first go in.
Rachel, would you say that 90% of the guest conducting do, the kids do not support their tones and that improves everything like right away?
That's part of it because they don't hold their horns the right way.
That too, yeah.
That's where it all comes from. They
Yeah,
don't
so if
sit
you can
correctly.
emphasize that within the warm-ups, that really helps a lot.
So, kind of a thing, just as a future teacher, how do you own all the budget to get pieces and like how much money do you actually have to like, buy new pieces if it's not in your library? But also how do you like collect these funds without it? If your program is not one, it's like, yeah, you can just buy whatever.
There's no such thing as that. I have sold so many cookie doughs, so many. No, I'm serious. So I had a good budget in my district. I got maybe 1,900, but that included music for all the band program. It included equipment like reeds, things like mouthpieces. That doesn't go very far. And that's the same budget I started with in 1988 or something like that, 1990. That's no change. That means, there's less. So fundraising is where it's at, right?
You have to.
You have to. It stinks. It's awful. It's rotten. But you gotta do it. And that's how you get money. If you want the stuff, that's how you get instruments. That's how you get. You don't want that, but that's what you gotta do.
But we do tell the parents, we buy our concert music for this, we will do instrument repairs for this, we will replace instrument, we tell them what it's for. But your colleagues out in the world are very generous. If somebody calls and wants to borrow a piece from me, I will loan out. Most people will loan music if you ask. Just if you become friends with a handful of directors in your area, or just reach out and say, hey, I'm new, we have a very limited library. Do you have a few staple pieces we could borrow? Our library is really thin. Most people are very gracious and want to see you be successful, and they will help you. So if you have a thin library, reach out. Literally call me. We have 1,500, 2,000 pieces in our library. I'll loan you music.
That's really true. And I know people have borrowed from us before. And you want to keep that music in good order. My last year, I reset the files because it was a mess. It got turned around somewhere in the Excel files. So a parent and I sat down and redid it. It took so much time, but I didn't want to leave a new director with garbage. I just couldn't do that to somebody. So, but it's music is expensive. Middle school, easy piece, $50.
At least, yeah, everything's between like $50 and $200.
And then you start talking high school and college. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I'd say the high school level now too, we are buying way more music than ever in an effort to make sure that we are matching more of what our student population is and being inclusive with our programming, because chances are, 50 years before you, that's not what your band library looks like. So you're gonna have to spend some money in order to make it look that way.
Because you're gonna go out through and clean out the theme music from Starsky and Hutch. And
I
stuff
still
out
have that
here.
in the library that I know. it's
Yeah,
there.
so the Happy Days theme is gonna be in your library, so- which might be cool.
Or the one, the world is white, the world is black. That's I threw it up. But it's it's really old because my program has been in existence a long time.
Yeah, so some of it gets dated.
Yeah.
But we also, we're very fortunate, we're very well funded and we fundraise. But we also do a large commission every 2 years and I do several small commissions. So we got to the point where our library is big enough that was kind of like the next step that we expanded into as far as literature, because we saw a need for, there's increased diversity we were seeing in music for older groups. So we started wanting more diverse art music for younger groups. So we've kind of hit on this commission projects, but that's kind of You'd be surprised how affordable it can be though. So don't think it's something you can't do. I mean, we have like the big one every other year is ridiculous and a lot of money, but it's 5 schools going together. But the little ones I do every year, a couple of them are very affordable. Most composers will be very
And most
reasonable.
of these composers are more than willing to work with your kids.
And they'll actually come in and work it.
Jim Kerno did the Carnival of the Animals for us one year. And it was for a big superintendent retirement who supported music and I had all those kids. So we did that. And it's not there's parts of it I love and there's parts of it I don't. But we did it and we paid some money for it. But, to have your band's name on that, your kids accomplished that, that's really cool. But and then like Kathy Fensky does a lot of compositions for young bands. And we had her work with our kids on her little Norwegian piece, So it's just stuff you
It's
can
kind of
make
fun
for
for
kids.
kids to see too that composers aren't dead old people.
Right. They're real, and they're just like us, yeah.
That they're alive.
Something to also to keep in mind if you're looking to do some kind of commissioning and trying to think of it in a budget, one good way to do it is to look at composition departments at universities. Young composers who are trying to get their foot in the door, they are usually pretty cheap and very collaborative, right? They're still learning. So that's another way you can do it a little more budget.
Yeah, we were part of a commission with Kataj Copley, and I did one with Harrison Collins a few years ago. And our first big one was with John Mackey, but that was in 2012, before he was super famous. So we got in like
How many of you guys are in Adam Cruz's class? You're coming to see me on Tuesday. Oh, we're gonna rewrite the Yankovic school song because it's so lame and old.
so they're gonna write it. Awesome.
Yeah, we'll see how this flies, but yeah. But you make projects up, like I've had Steve Taylor come in when his kid was in our band. And he came in and the kids all wrote little snippets and we included that in a composition. But what a great way for the kids to learn that it's real.
Or you see a composer who you know is gonna be good, or a guy in college when they're really good, and you're like, I'm gonna get them now. And then you'll be like, in their famous, I'll look so smart,
It'll pay off,
early
yeah.
genius, yeah. But definitely, yeah, seriously, it's true now, because like I had met Harrison when he was like a sophomore at ISU, and I had heard some of the stuff, and I was like, I want you to do a piece with me, and he ended up being part of our huge Neil consortium that we did a few years ago, and it was a big, and now I probably couldn't get him, which it's neither here nor there, but there are opportunities. But going back to your original question on the budget, just plan that you will have to do some fundraising. And
Make sure your admin's good with it.
but also, if you're in a Title I school, talk to your administration about Title I funds going towards curricular materials, and your music is your curricular materials. Some administrators are very open to that, helping with that.
We're Title I school, we never got it.
It depends on the administrators, because it's up to each building principal how they use those funds.
I have a question. Do you have like a biggest programming triumph and like a biggest like disaster where like you're like, I have to change all of this, like this just really isn't working? And like what was it and like why did all these things happen?
All of you, I have a story. So the first year when I was in Oswego, Mrs. Pappas was the band director, and she said, I have the perfect pieces for you. And I was like, okay, great, Mrs. Pappas. I was like a little nerdy.
And she's like amazing.
So she knew, so I did them, and they're probably a little too hard, and one of them was Amrita Roca, and and all these, and at the end of the contest, Charlie McGeady grabbed me by the arm. He's like, come over here, kiddo. And he grabbed me and goes, you better watch it. Those are big kid pieces. Those aren't for little kids. Or he like grabbed my arm and he scolded me. He's like, you better watch your programming. Those are big kid pieces or something like that. Those are serious works. And I was like, yes, sir, Mr. McGeady. And after that, I was like, you know what? I will take everyone's advice with a grain of salt, because I have to, I just couldn't 100% trust anybody. And it was a great lesson for me, and it was terrifying to go to contests, and it was,
You have to trust yourself.
yeah, and that's where I really learned, like, she had the best intentions and, of what she thought would, and she could have pulled off that program because she knew how to pace correctly and prepare the band and such, because she was still in the district with me. She had done the junior high and moved over to the high school. I came in, she's like, here's what you should play. And then flames and like comets crashing into my planet and everything. And so that was a very valuable and painful lesson. And I've had times where I overprogram, but I'm mean enough and there's enough German in me that I have enough grit and enough spite in me that I make it happen.
So it's the second time I've heard the word stubborn.
Yeah,
It's true, you have
it's a
to
very
be.
stubborn type of thing.
One year we were doing Super State and we did the Cajun dances. But I had a saxophone player, really good one. And the guy who used to teach Michigan State goes, "Oh, now I see why you programmed this." But because we had taught the business, but the sax solo was so difficult to play in tune and play well. And it was Scott Schwartz's daughter, and she was amazing. And so I had the right mix of kids. Could I have done it with most other bands? Never. So you have to trust yourself and buy the kids in, and it's all a buy-in. It's all a con job. It is. I think it is.
Yeah,
For the kids, yeah.
My disaster. I don't know. I think there's years that, I went to Super State one year at Huntley, and you don't always get the feedback you want on your rep selections, and you just feel terrible. And I know there's a ton of directors with that, those similar stories.
Get your hand slapped a little by the judges.
Yeah.
Or the conductor guy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, conducting judge.
But I think my biggest triumph in programming was, I know when I was young, I just worked really hard, and I was fortunate enough that we got into IMEC my third year when I was still teaching up north. And I just spent hours on programming that concert. It was the year David Maslanka died. And I think it was the centennial of Bernstein. So I did the Bernstein Mass with the ISU Brass Quintet, which is where I went, which was super cool to have my brass faculty working with my students. And then obviously Maslanka was at ISU all the time. And that was back when I was there. And we did Traveler, which Traveler is literally written about the end of, it was written for someone when they were retiring. And the whole back half of that is just contemplative of what is this end part of the last chapter. And during that, my grandma also passed away, who was my favorite person. So I'm going through that with the music myself. And I shared that with my students. And I had a student come up right before we went to IMEC. She's like, "Hey, my grandparents passing away too, and this has helped so much." And I think when you have those moments and then you go off and you have a badass performance, I don't know, it's cool.
Kids
And it
make
means a lot.
mistakes. Kids make mistakes. They're not superhuman beings, they're people, and they're going to make them. You're going to make them.
But when they connect like that, it's.
But when it connects, when that moment is so cool, and the kids understand the nuance and the, like when something resolves and they keep that whole we're gonna tape off, and you're like, oh crap, they're 12-year-olds, and it's really cool when that happens. Those are the special moments we live for.
Like my kids keep talking about last year when we were getting ready for Super State, we did Gerard Hall's Loch Lomond, and there was one rehearsal right before we went on Super State where they looked over and Josh, my colleague, was sitting at the desk bawling. And they're like, "What is going on?" He's like, "The tone quality is just so beautiful. I cannot believe how far we've come." And the kids talk about it. So they're like, "No, the day we made Mr. Johnson cry is the best day we ever had." They're like, "That's better than when we were at Cranard," And so they just were so emotional about that he had that genuine reaction to them playing. So.
I would say don't be afraid to let your kids play with musicianship. I hear so many bands that they don't
In the box.
have the nuances. They're in this little box and take a chance, play really piano. You do those nuances, and you would be amazed at how many people don't teach that. It's kind of scary.
It can be scary to let them, but they have to I think they have to experience extremes and then you pull them back in. And I said, it's private. This is just us it's just us. Nobody else is here. We can sound gross and figure this out. And we let them get really loud, really soft and what is the limit? And then we pull that back in, but you have to practice those extremes to figure out where it can go.
But you have to be you. So I've worked with Chip a lot, Stefano, and his program is one of those you look at and go, wow, that's so cool. And that's not my program. And my program didn't end on the best because we have seen a big, decline in kids. It doesn't mean it wasn't good. It just means it was different and in a much more diverse program, which is what our goal has always been. So you have to look at who you have and how you program with that.
And what your goal is for your program.
Yeah.
Really, because every program's gonna have different goals of who do you want in the room? Who do you want in the ensemble? And Chip and I have very different goals. Ours is we want every 8th grader in that 8th grade band with every child, special ed plans, not a great player, whatever is going on, they're in that 8th grade band with us. It is not an ability-based group. And we take a lot of pride in that because we want every child to have that special experience because it might be the last time they are with their peers in something that has that level of excellence. Because when they go to high school, whether it's music or academic, they're probably going to be leveled and never be with their grade level colleagues at something that really is that artistic or collaborative at that level again.
Do you guys take a class, I mean, this wasn't offered when I was in school, do you take a class on really including special needs kids? Because that is a really important skill. Good.
I mean, everybody, and our philosophy is always, our target doesn't change with any of the kids that I have in that 8th grade band. It's just our path might be very different, but we're all gonna get to that same target. I never lower the target or change it back or shortchange it for those kids. They're still gonna play the parts, they're gonna still play in tune, they're gonna still play the beautiful tone, hold their instrument right, sit, articulation, everything. But I might have to coach them up a little bit differently. I might have to give them more supports. Their support system will be different, obviously.
And it depends on disability too, like how far it is.
I'm gonna bring it back real quick for Hannah's question. So the triumph program is really hard. I don't know about that, but the difficult thing, that like the wall I ran into in my very first job, I took over for someone who I didn't know too much about their program in the past, but based on the library and then based on what happened after my concert, they pretty much only did pop music in the entire program. Yeah.
That's a big.
Sounds familiar.
Awesome. Did you do this band case in your 50? Yeah. Great. Thanks, Professor Vecchio. So yeah, like my first concert, I didn't do any pop music and I didn't know what I was walking into. It was my very first job. I was so young and I just I knew this was what was best. I was going to do it, but I didn't do it with the right context. Like the students were enjoying the music. They were doing great, but like the parents were like, I couldn't sing along with this. I don't know what this is. Like, why are you playing this music that I don't know the words for? And that was huge. And luckily that I worked that out and things got better, but knowing the community you're going to walk into, and I would have programmed that concert probably a little differently, not saying that I would have done the pop music, but I would have approached the concert differently. I would have set up the pieces differently, and I would have spoken before each one and talked about, I would have just done things differently. So I wouldn't have maybe programmed differently, but knowing the context of what you're walking into your first year in a new position is really important.
And not just with literature, I mean, find out as much as you can about the program you're going into. Find out the relationship with the director, with the kids, talk to like the secretary, the custodian, the people in the coffee shop. Find out what was the vibe. Was this person beloved and incompetent? Or were they beloved and very competent? Or were they hated and competent? I mean, there's all sorts of dynamics there. And you need to figure out, if they were very beloved, do not change anything at first. Tread lightly, gain trust, move slowly, that kind of thing. Because there's going to be a lot of trust issues initially, and you'll want to, 4 years will fly by, and you don't think they will, but they will, and then all of a sudden they're all your kids.
Mhm.
And then you can do what you like.
When we went through this at my school, the guy who took my position was hired just before COVID hit. And so I invited him to some of our online sessions to get to know the kids, because I thought that would be a great way to start connecting, because he's a whole different person than I am. And which is great, because you have to be yourself.
And if the director before you is successful and strong, they usually will want you to be successful and will want to work with you and help you. If they don't, then keep that in mind. That's another real strong signal for you to learn from, if they don't want to be helpful. What are you smiling about over there?
Are you guys already glad to be
I
together?
followed someone that left mid-year, and it was the easiest thing to follow. It really was, because that person just didn't care. I mean,
You're golden.
yeah, I mean, me showing up and showing that I cared was all they needed. So I liked that.
But
But
that's
you
such a key
probably
word,
did.
cared. Cared. You have to really, your kids got to feel safe. Yep. Especially.
Any more questions?
Kind of. I guess with program in my high school, like for the top ensemble, you had to audition and whatnot. Was that were the auditions ever? If you guys had to do auditions, or would you consider the auditions into what would be the rep for the next year and stuff like that? Because my experience was there was a lot of it was very saxophone heavy, and again it got a little stressful, but I felt like it was based on that audition. You know what I mean?
When I did singing, I would take a little bit of a piece I was going to do, then take the challenging part to see who could dig through it and start to figure it out. Because a lot of times for the younger kids, it's really hard, but if they made an effort, probably going to include them in the audition group. At the high school level, they audition for the bands in the fall or in the spring, and then they do their seating auditions in the fall.
I don't know how you guys do it.
The high school thing for us is really kind of hard because we have to have our rosters in December.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And so honestly, one of my favorite things we've done at O'Fallon, and it's probably kind of weird, is we don't post results anymore. we never tell a kid what band they are in until they get their schedule.
Well, that's-
Because that provides us some flexibility.
The stress.
As-
You just go still.
Yeah.
You're in band, but that's all I can
But I
tell you.
think that we think that because we grew up in a system where you got the list. And I think we also know how stressful those days are where the lists go up. And if our high school students now, we haven't posted a list in 4 years, have never had that day where the list goes up, they don't have that expectation. And it provides us as directors really great flexibility of, oh, this person isn't as strong as I thought they would be in May. We're going to move up this person to go along with the clarinet section. So
Keep adjusting until.
we adjusted literally up until the beginning of the school year. And our kids really do, like maybe for the top band, we'll tell them if they got into wind ensemble, but for the others, we just don't post the list. And it, I think, gives us a lot of flexibility, and the culture is no longer there that they're expecting that.
Something I did my last 2 years, and it was because things changed and we had a smaller group. I actually placed the kids and traded parts with them, so I had strong people on all 3 parts.
And
happy
mine's
years.
grade level, and we rotate all parts all the time. Everybody's rotated. I even let the kids, at times, if I know it's a piece where everybody's safe, I'll let them pick what part they play that one, and then I make a note of it, and then the next one, well, if you played first on this one, you have to rotate, and I'm kind of like careful of which pieces I allow them to pick with, so that I know like it's a safe one for maybe somebody who doesn't have range to pick a first, and it actually works out really well because they know, okay, I picked first, I need to learn, step up to this, and it's kind of worked since I just stopped doing chairs. So much inner competition is really unhealthy.
How many of you
It
guys
really
fight
is.
over chairs yet?
Inner competition is, I think it's just super unhealthy, especially the younger kids. I mean, I want them working collaborative as a trumpet section. Like our section is like our family, our home. We all have to sound good, not eye rolls at each other. That's the French horns. We say that for them. I'm a horn, so.
And I think that's really hard because we try to tell our kids all the time, like, you shouldn't judge how great you are based on how you compare to other people.
And do you really compare? Are singing auditions really fair? Because you could mess it up and
Yeah.
be somewhere else.
So we just don't have them. Occasionally I'll get a kid whose parent was like in band in Joliet and it's like, my mom wants me to have a chair. I'm like, then you're first.
Principal, take on the solos.
You're first.
But it's a changing culture in the schools, I think, because when I first started, chairs were big.
Oh, I was on Martin Core, like we did
I was
playing
too.
tests all the time and challenges.
And more, I like just make sure I just move the part on that first part and
Yeah.
change it around.
I pass out the right number of parts that I want, only 3 firsts and 5 seconds and 10 thirds and, but
And if you play first, as long as you play your part, we're good.
yeah, but I. Ryan's my witness. I was gonna say, one of the things you said was, go back and help. And Ryan will attest to this. He comes back and teaches our summer band with us last 2 years. And I think it's been a really like realistic, real life, good experience for you to see like how small children actually operate versus in theory. And what it's like to actually sight read with them and teach them and the beginners
And how to not make them cry.
or do make them cry. And just how when you actually conduct a real band, like you think they're gonna play when you give a downbeat, but you know what I mean? Like in theory, nothing actually is the way it's supposed to. So if you could have like your hometown or anything, if you go and talk to your director and just say, can I come and help in any capacity? If they have any sort of summer, I'm sure you'd be welcome with.
And I know
Open
schools in
arms.
town will never, I don't think, Chiltern, I never did it. I'm like, sure, come on in.
Yeah.
Because there's always somebody that needs to improve and needs help. And you get EFE hours, right?
Yeah, we love
There you go.
having it. So.
Anything else? All right. Well, thank you so much. I guess just a quick announcement, we have a reading bank coming up Wednesday. We're still selling MBA and March and Illini stickers and shirts as well, so support MBA. And thank you so much, that's awesome.
Thanks for asking.
Thanks for having us here on
We make sure that the right part fits in the right hands.
Exactly, and just sometimes like girls do that, and other times you could, yeah.
How many do this have? 5 people.
5?
Bye.
All right.
Is there anyone on there?
Not right now.
Are these, do these like go